Welcome back to What Are You Saying, the realest podcast in the world, the people's podcast, where people can not only learn and grow, but also feel heard and seen. I'm Usama.
I'm Mohammed.
And today we have a special guest for you guys. Actually, a couple people have messaged me about this human being, and I've actually messaged her myself back in October. And today we have Lama Aboubakr, who's a relationship coach. She has done a lot of videos about marriage, empowering your own self, and pretty much finding your own unique way of finding marriage, believing in dua, and a lot of great things. We're gonna have a lot of great conversations. So Lema, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad we got the chance to meet, inshallah.
Likewise, likewise. So before we start, you want to let everybody know where they can find you on all your socials.
Yeah, so if you just my full name, it's Lama Aboubakr, Aboubakr. If you can find me on YouTube, on Instagram, and my website's also my full name.
As far as the whole idea of marriage, obviously we know it's a blessing. It's something that if you're able to do it, it's a blessing from Allah, no one else. And when you're in married, people find that it's different from what they expected before. Because everyone has these preconceived notions of if I get married, my life is over. I'll never see my friends again. I have no time for myself because I'm investing all this time in someone. But once it happens, alhamdulillah, people are like, this is actually the best thing on earth. When I listened to my parents before, was I so resentful or neglectful? And why did I think as if what I was yearning for was going to be completely opposite? Can you speak about people's perception, so to say, about why they don't want to get married, as far as like might they want to get married, but their intention is wrong? Not because they don't want to get married, just because they feel like they might lose out on who they are, as far as who they are originally, their identity, and that whole aspect.
Yeah, for sure. So this is a great question because there's a whole spectrum of people that think differently about marriage. And on one end of the spectrum, it's more of the people who avoid marriage, and their idea of marriage is that it's a trap and that you're going to be trapped in this relationship and you can't leave and you're going to be constricted by your husband or your wife. And it's just this like really constricting idea of marriage. And then people who are more on the other side of marriage, who are like, I need marriage now. Like, if it doesn't happen, this is a really big problem. They've kind of over fantasized marriage and they've made it mean like this big thing that's going to solve their life. And it's usually people are in the middle sometimes, right? But like there's a huge variety of people where they come from, how they approach marriage. And what I've seen is the people who are struggling with marriage are the ones who are either on either end of the spectrum. People who are either like, I need it. If I don't get it, like that means I'm worthless, and that means this, that means that. That means no one's ever gonna love me. I'm gonna die alone. Or on the other side is like, I have to avoid marriage because I want to be free for the rest of my life. And those kind of people, they avoid any sort of emotional intimacy because they're so terrified of what would happen if they actually let someone into their life. And either way, it's all coming from trauma of their past, either the way they were raised or, the experiences they had before. But the goal is to get you to a more middle, which is the secure feeling of I I'm okay where I'm at. I am so full and whole and complete, and I love my life where I'm at. And I would love to have a companion to share my life with. And it's not like in an attachment way. It's more of very secure. Like you welcome love in, you welcome vulnerability in, and that is a skill to develop. And a lot of people, unfortunately, especially in the Muslim community, we're not taught how to allow love in, how to communicate, how to be vulnerable, and all of that is required for you to be in a healthy marriage. So of course, when people are avoiding marriage or really anxious about it, it's because they're not aware of like how to actually go about it, how to be in a relationship, how to be safe when someone is in your life. And when I say be safe, I'm talking emotionally, right? Emotionally, when conflict comes up or when trouble or any problems come up, do you feel like you have to run away and um, or do you feel like that you take the time to communicate and safely say like you know what, this is really hard, but I'm here to stick through it and figure it out with you, and that's what builds emotional intimacy, right? So to answer your question, it's there's so much to talk about there, but for anyone listening, you could fall on both two ends of the spectrum, and you could be both depending on your mood too. So it's just it depends on the person.
Beautiful answer, and I loved how you talked about emotional intimacy. I think that's a concept that most people definitely overlooked. When it comes to marriage, a lot of the time, especially for us, the brothers, it's like we know what we want, we know what we're looking for, but oftentimes our whole ideals is totally different once you're in it, right? I tell a lot of brothers that the whole idea of love does not start until you're married. Before is like the whole romanticization and stuff like that. Can you please speak to the idea of emotional intelligence? I think that's one thing that a lot of people overlooked or underestimate, especially from the brothers. They do not think that emotional intelligence will help. Number one, a lot of the brothers might have only had, their mom, sister, or maybe had no sisters. So as far as a woman, her feelings, what she's looking for, the answers that she wants in the moment, as opposed to the answer that's correct is totally different, and how to go about those things. Is there any advice you give to Muslim brothers as far as the whole nuance and the variance when it comes to emotional intelligence, and how these things are really the deal breaker of having a long-term marriage as opposed to a short-term marriage, when you're trying to base it off your whole philosophy and ideals and what you think is right versus what's more holistic for you and your partner?
Yeah, okay. So let's first define what emotional intelligence is. And I like to think of it in a very practical level. If someone who has a very wide range of emotions and they're able to tolerate the negative emotions very well, and they don't just run away as soon as something uncomfortable happens. Right? So that's one kind of practical way of seeing someone who is emotionally intelligent, is that you talk to them, something uncomfortable comes up, how do they react? Do they get really defensive and like, oh, this is all your fault, this is all this? Do they take responsibility for their emotions that come up when they feel defensive? Does it feel like um, does it feel like they have to blame the other person because it's just too much to take responsibility for that? And do they, all of this matters, because when it comes to the actual marriage, when someone doesn't really have emotional intelligence, or knows the capacity to handle their own emotions, it is so easy to blame the other person and think it's all their fault, and project all your stuff onto the other person, which obviously will push the other person away, and the relationship will end. And usually you see marriages where, if a woman says, hey, like, I feel like you don't love me, usually the man, if they don't have emotional intelligence, they're still taking it really personally, like, oh, am I not a good enough man for you, like this, and then they kind of shut down, and he starts avoiding her, and she feels more, anxious that he's kind of distancing her. And all of that would have been solved if, when someone is when, especially in a man, when he's in a healthy masculine uh, the ability to handle his emotions, the ability to lead the way, especially when a woman has a lot of emotions and he's able to hold that space for her, that is the most healing thing you can do for yourself and for the woman. Because when a man is able to handle all emotions, and the way, a side note, the way I like to define confidence is someone who is able to handle any emotion that comes up, no matter how hard it is. That doesn't mean negative emotions don't come up for them. It means it comes up for them and they're able to pause and be like, okay, this is what I'm feeling. And it's not a problem, but I'm feeling this way. And they allow negative emotions to come up and giving it the space it needs to just be there, without making it mean that they're a bad human or there's something's wrong with them. It just means that they're a human being and emotions are going to come up. So why emotional intelligence is so important, or that capacity to handle those emotions is so important, is because when you're able to do that for yourself, you are so much more capable of handling it when someone else like tries to give it to you, right? When a woman comes to you and says, hey, I'm feeling this, I feel like you don't care about me, I feel like you this, you're able to just stand in and listen and not take it personally. And when she sees that you're not taking it personally, she feels safe. And when a woman feels safe around her man, it's game over. It's just so good. It's like, that's it. Everything just feels so much more smoother. Everything just feels so much more intimate. And the intimacy that a man is looking for usually stems from like that emotional connection that leads to better everything, right? Better physical intimacy, better just everything. Everything just feels so much better. So it all starts with, when emotions are brought up to you, or when you feel a big emotion, how do you handle it? When you feel yourself getting defensive, do you notice it and pause and try to like reflect and understand where it's coming from? Or do you think, oh, it's coming from her and I got to get rid of her, or, like blame her? And so this makes a world of a difference. This can make or break your relationship, and it really makes a huge difference. And it can make any woman, if we're specifically talking about men, it can make any woman melt into his arms when he knows how to handle emotions and how to lead the way. And so I always say it only takes really one secure person in the relationship to make the whole dynamic much more better flowing. And so that's why it's so, especially for men, it's so important to learn emotional intelligence for their own sake, really. Yeah.
I do have to agree with you because I'm not gonna lie to you. Uh, you said a lot of things which did captivate me. Looking back at my younger self versus now, I've had way more emotional intelligence now versus when I was like 20 or 25 or even like way younger. And obviously, I think it's really important for a man to take. I'm not gonna say like, go take a whole course, but like to learn or to actually go learn from people who have better emotional intelligence from you. Because to articulate yourself in a certain situation is really important. Like, of course, we're talking about marriage now to relationships because the easiest thing to do is to blame someone. Oh, like it's you. But like sometimes you have to understand how someone like takes love in or how someone like gives love, and I think that's really important. Also, regarding emotional intelligence, sometimes you can also see amongst your friendships as well. Like some people are way too defensive, or some people start like blaming, or they want to go off on you. So I think to that person or to that guy, I want to say, I would you have to start working on yourself because I have a lot of brothers who say, "Oh, I want to get married," but I'm like, bro, you get mad way too easily. I'm like, if you get mad at me, I feel bad for your wife. Because I
Yeah.
remember one time I was making a joke to one of my friends. I'm like, "What are you gonna do if your wife, like, for example, cooks you a meal, it doesn't taste good?" He's like, "Oh, I'm gonna go off on her." I'm like, "You're not gonna
Oh,
survive. You're not gonna survive a month."
yeah, bro. That's the least of your worries of your food not tasting good. Yeah.
No, but honestly, I think that one aside from understanding like the role of men and women and like the roles of marriage, generally as a man, you have to learn how to like keep your emotions in check and
Hmm.
your anger because that's what shows a real man. Like I know a lot of girls say, "Oh, I want a guy who's 6 feet or whatever," but I would say this: a girl should generally be with a guy who does not want to get into the fight. Because if
Hmm.
you've been in a fight as a guy, you know you can easily get injured. The one who wants to entertain it clearly haven't been in a fight because that also that is a lack of maturity, there's a lack of understanding, a lack of you're also putting your significant other at risk. But I do agree, though. I think a lot of men, even if you are emotionally mature, there's still stuff to learn, because obviously, again, social media has a huge impact on relationships, and sometimes like man or woman, you see something on social media, then you start like thinking twice about it with amongst your own relationship.
Right. And just to add really quick, I do think um, as long as you just take responsibility for your emotions and your mistakes, you're good, right? So I'm not saying you should never get angry, but more of like when you do get angry and you say something you don't mean, do you take the time to apologize and own it? And that's really it's because we're at the end of the day we are human and sometimes we slip up.
Very true.
I know we're going to talk about as far as like if you want to get married, what's the intent, how to pursue it, the right course of way. But before getting into that, for those who've already been a part of that process, that's already going through it, a lot of things that we have conversations with brothers, we hear from sisters, is the aspect of the scenarios of the results. Like you're trying to get married, you're meeting person after person, whether you find someone, whether it's a parent or an aunt in the community, someone in the community that has referred you to this person, you go meet with them with your family. Maybe after a few months, you thought it was going to be something, it didn't work. It just keeps happening over and over and over again. And as this compounds, it becomes more nerve wracking, more annoying, and one might be confused, or one might even revert to not wanting to have marriage at all because it's just too much. What do you say to those who are in that process right now, thinking that they want it to happen on the first, but maybe they've already met two or three or four people, and sometimes people don't want to feel shamed. You know, conversations happens, people talk and stuff. So there's also that judgment, which is also tough for a young brother or a young sister as well, right? So what do you do when the results are not in your favor at the moment?
Yes, so this is a great question. It's my favorite question because this is the part where a lot of people struggle. They use their past evidence as a way to define their future, as a way to define the next relationship. As an example, according to my evidence of the 5 people I've talked to, each one of them doesn't work, which means I'm not good at relationships, which means something's wrong with me. So what happens, right? They're carrying this whole identity, this belief that things don't work out for them very easily. So the next time they get into a relationship, they get excited in the beginning, but then those subconscious fears come up again, like let's say a week or two in, and then they operate from those subconscious thoughts of like, oh, it's probably going to end. It's probably, it's the same results every time. So what makes me think this is going to be any different? And guess what's going to happen? Your energy is off. You're not the same person. Like who you're not authentically yourself anymore. And so now the person, either the man or the woman, is looking for ways to either sabotage or they're looking for ways of how that person's not actually interested in them. And so they literally show up anxious or just they don't show up themselves anymore. And obviously the person's going to notice and they're going to be like, what the heck is this? And they leave because it literally proves. And then what happens is that the brain gathers more evidence of how it's not possible for me, and it makes that identity even stronger. I'm never going to get married. Something's wrong with me. Every time this happens, someone leaves me. But the problem is they're not noticing the pattern that keeps coming up is they keep believing the same exact thoughts in every single situation, but they're not even noticing it. They think it's coming from the other person not wanting them, when the reality is they're more operating from like the fears that they're coming from. And when you're operating from fear, obviously your ego is going to come up and it's going to be like, oh, something's wrong with me. And you're going to make it all about you. And you're going to make it all these problems that come up, which no one wants to be around someone who's constantly making it about them. Right. I'm talking more about from a shameful perspective, like either get really defensive or, look for problems or something like that. And even if you fake it and you act confident, people can still notice that energy. People can still notice something is off. And when you're in that perspective, when you're in that energy coming from fear, from a spiritual perspective and from a practical perspective, Allah doesn't give you something that you can't handle. Even if you were to stay in that fearful energy and you were to get married, that marriage is not going to last because you're operating from fear the whole time. When you get married, you're still going to be thinking, are they going to leave me? This is probably not going to work, like because they haven't worked on those beliefs. So it's not going to go anywhere if you get married or not. You have to pause and take a look at that identity, those thoughts that are coming up, and question it, and notice that which one came first, these thoughts, or am I just using my past evidence to prove it over and over again? Because the brain is looking for familiarity. It's looking for something to be certain about, right? Because that's what it's good at. It just wants to feel safe. And the only way to feel safe is to be certain about something, because uncertainty is very scary to the brain. So what it'll do, it'll use the past evidence to predict the next interaction so that you're not caught off guard. And in order to do that, it's going to reproduce the same exact actions, the same exact feelings. And the only way to break that chain is when you stop and you're becoming aware of those thoughts before it takes over and takes over the whole relationship. And to kind of give you an idea, as a personal story, I think I might have shared it on YouTube, but I would have the same situation before I met my husband. Every single time, I'm more on the avoidance side, so I'd constantly look for ways to cause to show that it's not going to work for me. And I noticed it every time, right? Every time a minor inconvenience came up, I would just end the whole thing. Okay, and then eventually I met my husband, and the same exact pattern came up, but this time I felt so much more aware of it, and I stopped it in its tracks before it went any further. And that's how alhamdulillah, I let myself just kind of let my fears down and let my guard down and actually go from there. But I wouldn't be able to do that if I'm not aware of what's causing that fear in the first place. And that's usually when I, for example, when I work with my clients, as soon as we uncover those fears and kind of learn how to neutralize it and feel more at ease and start coming from faith and trust, immediately, they start noticing the better potentials start coming. And they still just feel so much more relaxed during the search process because they're not taking it personally anymore. And they're operating from a whole different realm of emotions, right? They're operating from faith and optimism. And I wonder who's out there for me. And I wonder what Allah's written for me. And they don't use their past evidence as a track record of how much they failed. They used it as all these opportunities that didn't work out, built exactly who I need to be today in order to have the beautiful, healthy marriage that I want to have. And every single person that you've met that didn't work out, there is always, always wisdom and lessons in that if you choose to see it. And people can either choose to see the wisdom and the lessons and the things that you need to move to up level to the next step, or you could see it as, oh, like that failed, nothing ever works out for me, what's wrong with me? Those are very two different roads that take you to different places. And when you're stuck on the road of failure and like, why doesn't anything work out for me, you're going to prove that right to yourself every single time. So to kind of summarize this whole thing, you have to make sure you're not using your past evidence as proof of why things won't work out for you in the future, because that doesn't mean anything. We have examples from all of the Sahaba and our own Prophet ﷺ of the amount of times he failed and failed and failed and he got back up and continued, because he doesn't necessarily trust the people or the evidence. We trust in God. We trust Allah can make anything possible. So no matter how bad your past was, it doesn't mean anything unless you want to make it mean something. And so it has a lot of a part of this is a lot of spiritual maturity and the ability to recognize your thoughts that's blocking you every single time.
You mentioned a lot, but one thing that stuck out to me is like, I guess, mindset and like the way you're thinking. So because you're obviously a relationship coach, how do you sit down with your clients who are maybe facing what you just spoke about? Because again, rejection is definitely not easy. Not everyone's strong enough, especially if it's someone you so-called like love or liked, and it's like, oh, they left, or you left, or whatever it might be. So how do you sit down with them and try to like, what steps do you take in terms of working with them and like helping them get back to stage one?
Yes. So this is my core work here, right? I try to keep it very simple. It's the three things that I focus on is, what are your thoughts about yourself? What are your thoughts about the opposite gender? And what do you think is possible for you? Like, what do you think God can give you? The first thing I like to focus on when, for example, something failed, as I ask them, what does this mean about you as a human being? Okay. So if someone leaves you, do you make it mean I'm such a failure and I'm unlovable and no one will ever want me ever again? Or do you make it mean, oh, that alhamdulillah, Allah dodged the bullet, that was not my person, on to the next? The more you train that muscle, that second one, alhamdulillah, that wasn't my person, I'm so glad that didn't work out because Allah's saving me something like much better. And you don't take it personal. As soon as you take it personal, you're kind of gonna spiral in shame and not learn anything from it. So you have to get out of that and notice, okay, what does it actually mean that they rejected me? Okay, it means that I am not their person. It means there's something that they saw that they didn't want, and I want someone that wants me. I want a person that wants me. Why would I even like, why would it's not something that even makes any sense. Why would I cry over someone that doesn't want me? They don't want me. I don't want, let's khalas, like, let's move on. But as soon as you're like, where people trip up here is they're like, oh, this means this about me. They start making it mean something big about them, something like deeply wrong with them, and that's where people trip up. So the first thing I like to ask is, what does it mean about you that you're single right now? Do you label it as something bad and shameful, or is it just more of I like to label it as like a beautiful status that Allah has gifted you at the moment, that is saving you from bigger things that you don't even know that's happening. And if a rejection comes your way, Allah's training you how to handle rejection to become the man or the woman that you need to be when marriage comes. And so all of this really matters.
And that's a beautiful answer as well. I think the first thing I take from it is when you talked about spiritual maturity. Because number one, it's a trial, not a punishment. And like you said, there's wisdom behind every event. So it's on you as the person to take the time, reflect, analyze, and comprehend what is the bigger picture, the bigger meaning. And maybe that person did not want to be with you, but does not mean that you cannot, like you said, do better in order to be that better version for someone else that's going to appreciate those qualities that the first person did not see. And I think the second thing as well, like you said, not to take anything personal, and that's where perception comes in. Because a lot of the times, especially when it comes to marriage, looking for someone, when it doesn't happen, you feel as if the whole weight of the world is on your shoulders, you know? Like mountains, boulders are literally on your shoulders. But if you have that spiritual maturity and that understanding and that whole yaqeen, essentially, you realize it's like a speck of dust. It's like ants. You could just dust it off, right? Um, what is big today will appear like nothing tomorrow. Only if you allow it to be, right? So that's the whole power of the mind. And this is a whole beautiful conversation because, yes, we're talking about marriage, wanting to find someone, all these inklings, what it takes, the different pathways, as well as the spiritual journey, outward and inwardly as well. But I wonder for yourself, while being a relationship coach, you've seen everything. So, yes, you've helped a lot of people. Inshallah, you continue to do so, meet someone, better themselves. But what about the other end of the spectrum? Those who are probably in the middle, where it's rocky. They've been together 3, 5, 7, 10 years, might have had a kid, might have not. They don't know what's going to happen, how things might work out for the better. How do you deal with that? As well as people, you know what, they've probably had sessions with you. After maybe a few months, we've come to conclusion that we do not want to continue this marriage. And that in itself is another trial because obviously you were meant to be with someone who you thought you would be with forever. But things happen, and that might have not been the case. And now their whole world has to go back to square one. And like you said, all the advice you've given in the past 25 minutes, it compounds even further because they actually went through the proper steps of getting married. And now they have to deal with the fact that they might have to go through this all over again on top of the house, the kids, the relationships. That's the whole galaxy and planets and memories they built. Now it's something that fades away. How do you deal with that other end of the spectrum? Those who are probably going through it in the middle, as well as those who've come to the conclusion of ending it.
Yes. So you mentioned something that I would like to kind of touch on a little bit. Usually, when someone breaks up or, things don't work out or something happens, immediately they think, okay, now I'm back to square one. Now I have to figure it out. And they have to go back to this jungle of dating and figuring it out and all this. And it just feels like so heavy. And the way I like to think of it is every person you meet is a chapter, and the chapter will close, and you're constantly building up on this book. Like it's not you're never going back to square one. That's not even a thing. And I have met many women who were divorced from, for men and women who were divorced from their first spouse, and they tell me now, like, alhamdulillah, we found them they found the next spouse, and they're so much more happier. And they tell me, I am so like extremely grateful that I went through that first divorce. And I wouldn't be the version that I am today if I didn't go through that divorce. And you can see the wisdom is just dripping from every single thing. Like they just know exactly how to make a marriage work now because they've been through it, they experienced the pain of it, and now they're like, all right, round two, right? Allah's giving me another round that I am going to be even happier in. So this idea of going back to square one doesn't necessarily exist because that would mean that all of your wisdom and all of the experiences just got erased and you're just like you're back to square one, but that's never true. You're always by every day you're gaining self-confidence, you're gaining wisdom, you're gaining thoughts, you're building up a life that you never knew was coming. Allah is building up such something so much bigger than you can ever imagine, and that is required is those little breakups, those divorces that come up, and it's part of the experience. And what we can do to make it easier is obviously when, for example, a divorce happens or a breakup happens, to give yourself the space to actually grieve it and have the heartbreak that you need, knowing from a very foundational perspective that there is something good in this. I don't know what it is. It doesn't feel like it's good right now. It feels really traumatic and terrible right now, but I know there is something coming because there is always something coming, and you have to, that's your job, right? Our only job is to have faith that there is always something coming better. It's just a fact. It's just that like it doesn't serve you in any way to think like nothing good is ever going to happen for me ever again. What's the point of that? That's the ego speaking, right? The ego wants you to sit in self-pity for the rest of your life and be miserable and depressed because of that one experience. And people do stay in that sometimes because they're not aware that it's a choice. They're not aware that you can snap out of this and realize the powerful man or woman that you've become after this experience is now you're gonna like have so much better potential spouses because the kind of person you are now, right? The maturity, all of it, it's just a new level. You've leveled up. And so I really like to point out for anyone thinking that, oh, okay, I have to go back to square one, I have to start all over. It just doesn't serve you in any way to think that way. It really helps to see that everything is a step up. You're always climbing that ladder, even if that ladder feels really miserable and hard in the moment. You're still climbing up because that's God has big things for you, and you don't even see it.
I think that's really important because I think we're not able to go see ahead. It's funny because I realize that sometimes that we're doing business when I'm podcasting. When someone's doing a business or like you're starting something, we always like to think like 5, 6 years ahead, right? But when it comes to certain things, like when we're stuck in a situation, for example, I'm talking to someone and it's not going anywhere, or you're going through a divorce, you automatically start going negative, like, "Ya Allah, why?" But obviously, there's always a wisdom, there's always a hikmah in terms of like why Allah is doing this, whatever it might be. Or even sometimes you'll question, why am I not talking to this person no more? Why is this thing not working no more? And I always say this, like sometimes in the addition, there could be a reason as to why you're not both you're speaking right now. It could be you're both not meant for each other at the moment. You could be meant for each other, God only knows, or Allah has someone better for you. So there's always something better on the other side. It depends on how you have to, as you said, you have to kind of like change the way you think in terms of like looking forward and pretty much forgetting this whole negative mindset, because it's so easy. As soon as you start rolling this negative, you start playing with you. Remember, you said an iconic quote years ago. Are you controlling your thoughts, or are your thoughts controlling you? And you see it among certain people, and maybe you obviously see it amongst your clients as well, where sometimes you're realizing their brain is taking care of them, because as you said earlier, your brain is supposed to keep you something safe and with what they know is familiar. Your heart is what keeps you going and going and going, which kind of leads me to my next question about dua and manifestation are obviously really important within Islam. We obviously make, of course, Ramadan's coming in 2 weeks. What for dua? What's your views on it? Why do you think it's so important for someone to make dua? Obviously, specifically about marriage, everyone wants to make dua for marriage. So, what do you think about dua and the importance of it?
Yeah, that's a I love this topic. I keep saying that about every question, but I actually have a free class coming up just to teach everyone about how to feel so much more powerful in your dua. And one of the number one blocks that comes up in du'as is your thoughts about God, your thoughts about who Allah is and what He can do for you. And sometimes when we're making dua about marriage and we're like, this is the millionth time we're making the dua, and at this time it just feels so watered down. It's like something you do on a checklist now. It's like, oh yeah, I know I'm supposed to be praying for marriage, so here we go. Ya Allah, give me a dua. And you don't really feel it because your subconscious mind has a lot of evidence of all the times that it hasn't worked out. And sometimes we avoid making a heartfelt dua because we don't want to be disappointed again and again. And it just feels sometimes painful for people to even keep making dua, because oftentimes maybe you hear questions like, at what point do I stop making dua? Because it just feels painful when they make it and they don't see results. And then they're like, oh, here we go. Like, I have to keep making it, even though I don't really believe it's going to work. And the problem with that is when you don't have that conviction that Allah will answer you, one of the prerequisite of an answered dua is to have conviction that Allah will answer you. And the problem here is it's kind of like which one comes first, right? It's this belief that, oh, like I've been making dua for 10 years, it's not working, so like what's the point now? It's not like things are going to change. Those fears, those subconscious thoughts that we don't even notice, we just think it's true, is the reason why your duas are not being answered anymore. And now it just feels like, well, it just feels like more of a checklist. Your heart's not really into it. It just feels like it doesn't feel like from your heart, right? And we have to go back to needing Allah to make things work for us. And when we've lost that connection to Allah, when I say lost that connection, your thoughts about what God can do for you has changed. And to kind of give a summary of this, every single thought you have about Allah, each individual sentence you have creates how you feel. So if I have a thought, I'm not a good enough Muslim, why would He answer me? How is that going to make you feel? It's going to make you feel disconnected. It's going to make you feel shame. When you feel disconnected and shame, what do? Action-wise, you make less dua. You literally feel disconnected. And then the result is your dua is literally just not answered because one of the prerequisites is to have conviction, right? So it's such a vicious cycle. And I always, one thing I do with my clients, especially with the understanding your connection with Allah, is you have to keep writing out what you think Allah thinks of you, how Allah sees you, what you think Allah perceives you as, and what you perceive Allah, how you perceive Allah as. because these are the thoughts that make you feel either connected or disconnected. And we all know this, right? I am what my servant thinks of me. Very simply. So what does that mean? It means, what are the thoughts that you have about Allah? And it's so practical when you literally write out a list of what you think Allah thinks of you, the negative thoughts, right? The scary negative thoughts that we have, like Allah has abandoned me, Allah's ignoring me, Allah, what, like, I messed up this many times, why would Allah forgive me? Or if someone feels a lot of, especially this one, people can feel embarrassed about this, but feel resentful towards Allah, and they don't want to even face that feeling. They don't know how to even process that, because we know logically we're not supposed to be afraid, we're not supposed to be angry at Allah, but there's a part of us that is, and we don't know how to deal with it, so we just push it down and we ignore it, and like, all of that needs to surface up, be processed, and clean it up, so that we feel more like clean about what Allah, our thoughts about Allah, right? And so this is a whole class that I can teach on. So, which, again, for anyone listening, it's a free class I'm doing. So if you can sign up on my website, inshallah, or sign up on my what's it called, email list, and inshallah that announcement will come up before Ramadan.
And even speaking to that, like that whole polarity as far as your wants versus your needs. Speak about, I don't want to say the privilege, speak about the importance, the significance of studying history, particularly the seerah, because most of the time growing up, obviously you learn about the basic of Islam. Not most people are sort of knowledge, obviously, right? You have jobs, you have things to do, families and responsibilities. So if you're not able to pursue or have a further education in specific fields of Islam, you're going you're living your life based on what you're going through, and obviously still things from the religion that you have to do as a Muslim. Now, besides that, if you do study the history and you understand what the Sahaba went through, these are incredible individuals. Each and every single individual has their own story. And when you learn about each and individual story, the sacrifices, the pain, the lessons, the brotherhood, the sisterhood, and ultimately the sacrifice, and different aspects of their lives, you realize how beautiful these people were because, number one, they were the first generation, and their character speaks. We're still talking to them to this day because they were able to give up so much just for so little, which might have been at the moment, but the fact that we're still talking about them till now shows how incredible they are because they didn't need all of that in order to be who they were. Not all the wealth was necessary because to do so would neglect or harm someone else, maybe their neighbors, or maybe to marry this person was not beneficial because this person, their family, are the same people that are torturing the Sahaba on a daily basis. Like all these nuances, a lot of people do not know unless you study the history. What do you tell people that obviously besides what you're going through right now on the individual perspectives, take the time to really reflect and study this history of what this religion went through and how these people were the same thing as you. They were fathers or sisters, brothers, people in the community, and they had to deal with issues as far as marriage, not being married, someone just revoking the marriage because you became a Muslim and announcing it. Like these were emotions that people had to deal with. Even the Prophet ﷺ, his own daughters, right? What is the importance of studying the Sirah as alongside wanting to get married, as far as having a more varied, wider perspective?
Yeah, the Rasulullah SAW, the amount of uh tiny, every single moment of his life was nuggets of wisdom, every single thing. And every time you learn about the Sirah, I try to learn about the Sirah once a year, like, go to a Sirah intensive or anything like that. You just learn different things every time from a different perspective and everything. And so some people may say, well, yeah, I mean, the prophets were the prophets. It's not really like I'm just a human being. They were prophets. And it's like, well, Allah is very intentional with the way he created these stories on earth. Like, there's a reason why Allah gave us these stories. So, Maryam alayhi salam, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, Prophet Musa, Prophet, all of these have so much wisdom that when you really take the time to study it, you'll realize that all the trials that you're going through is not an accident. It's not that you're doing anything wrong. It's designed specifically for you to learn what you need to learn. and it's designed for you to evolve and elevate yourself to the next level, to become the person that you need to be to worship Allah in a better way, because that's our purpose. Our purpose is to be tested with every single circumstance that comes up. How do you respond? That's it. That's our only purpose. How do you respond with every circumstance that comes up? Do you choose to get closer to Allah, or do you choose to, be resentful and mad and get really ashamed about yourself and all that? Now, in that perspective of like it's kind of like an inner child that comes out, right? That just like this, it just throws a tantrum every time, and every minor inconvenience comes up. That when you take a look at that and say, okay, what can I do to become an adult, to become the older, evolved version of me, so that I can live my purpose better? And it doesn't matter, single, married, whatever it is, you're always living your purpose. All you have to do is every circumstance that comes up for you, how do you respond? And the seerah is a beautiful way to learn how the Prophet ﷺ responded. All the prophet, all the prophets, all the Sahaba. And even if you look at any modern day, anyone that's successful in the worldly sense, they've all like suffered in so many ways. If you really research their biographies and everything like that, everyone who feels like you look up to them or anything like that, you can tell from they've been through a lot of things that made them who they are today. So what makes you think you're any different? Like your problems is like a gift. It's a blessing. And honestly, low key, like every time I feel like a negative problem, a negative like feeling come up, I get kind of excited. I'm like, oh, like there's a new lesson coming my way that I don't know what Allah's gonna unlock for me, right? So it's healthy to start seeing your problems as like an opportunities, and like there's so much more coming, and in learning how to feel what you need to feel, which is all the negative thoughts, like feelings that come up, and you just have a bigger capacity for life and emotions, and it just makes you feel more alive again when you see life that way.
I have a question for you, and I think I really want to hear your opinion about it. This whole alpha male thing, you hear it on TikTok, you hear the alpha male topic, whatever it might be, right? Like, oh, men should not share their emotions with their wife, or men should not cry, or whatever it might be. Now, obviously, I think crying is human nature. So all the guys are like, oh, we don't cry. I think every guy knows in their house they cried about something that's obviously upset them. And you probably have had situations where maybe like women who are married have went to you and they said, my husband does not know how to express his emotions. So to advice to men who have this problem, because clearly a lot of us do, even amongst the Muslim community, because again, most of men you always hear as a kid, we both know this. Oh, men don't cry, men don't cry, men don't cry, men don't share their emotions. So how do you combat that? What's your advice regarding that?
Yeah, I think first of all, I think men have a lot of pressure and responsibility to always be a certain way and act a certain way, and it's so heavy sometimes that like at one end they're told not to cry, but one other end cry because like you have to like loosen up a little bit, and they feel conflicted sometimes, and there's an internal conflict. And so I alhamdulillah, I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of male clients, and I see like deep down at their soul, like they want to open up, but it just feels so scary to do that sometimes. It feels like the fear of judgment of like what kind I would probably be a really weak man if I opened up and I actually cried and all this. And sometimes it just takes like small little doses, if of just trying to open up slowly, and showing your body and your brain that it's safe to open up, and that there's nothing wrong with you if you opened up. And it is more of a like, when I say safety, I'm talking about more of the nervous system, right? It just feels like if I've been taught all my life that I'll be a weak man if I open up, obviously your brain's going to be like, hell no, don't open up. Like you got to stay close. Like don't share anything, right? So and especially with women listening to this, if you have a man or doesn't really open up with you, it really helps to like not pressure him into opening up, but more of like give him the safe space that he needs, and he just sometimes needs time to feel at ease, to feel safe in order to slowly open up. And it's different with everyone, right? Like I can share like a lot of different experiences with people that I've seen. Some people takes a year, 2 years, a couple months. It's a couple years, right? It just really depends on how safe they feel. And for men listening to this, if you focus on, what does it mean about a man if he were to open up? What does it mean? Does it mean he's weak, or does it mean he's strong? And you can look at examples of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. You can look at examples of actual strong men that did cry, that did express emotion, and just use that as an example, really.
Yeah, also, I agree with everything you say, and I'll say this just to add on to your point before I ask my
Yeah.
next question, because I think a lot of men, again, I don't think every man should cry every single second. Like, don't be eating the pasta then cry, "Oh, babe, this is amazing food." Like, that's just weird. At that point, like, you can't be crying about everything. But I will say, I think it's really important for a man. I think it's really important for the wife or the to understand that every man, obviously, in terms of love languages, we receive love differently. Some guys, for example, like even myself, till this day, I have a harder time opening up. The only time I really open up is to this guy. Like he's someone he probably knows more stuff about me than like other people do. And I think that it's really important. If it's I think it's also really important to know, to add on to your point, that there are people who are there for you, and if someone is gonna laugh at your lows, it's not someone you want to be around with to begin with. And if a, and I think the person you marry, girl, guy, like whoever, like whether it's like you're a girl crying or a guy crying, whatever it may be, I don't think your significant other will ever make you feel like you're not able to feel vulnerable around them. Because if the purpose of the foundation is to obviously go forward, then I don't think that's gonna matter. Which kind of does lead me to my next point. There's a lot of people, including myself, but a lot of people out there who are trying to get married. Obviously, why are you laughing, bro?
No, I'm not laughing.
There's like people who are trying to get married out here. And what is your advice, the steps that they can take? What do you advise them? What are some things you look for, saying, this person says he wants to get married, but they're not really ready? So what are some key nuggets you can give us based off your experience as a relationship coach?
Yeah, first advice is I have so many videos on my YouTube video that I've discussed in detail of like how to start and everything. So for people who really want to go in depth, I start with my YouTube channel, inshallah. Um, but first thing I like to talk about is your self concept, what you think of yourself, what you think you're looking for too. So let's say, for as an example, you want to first of all you want to find out what your own values and priorities are in your own life, so that you can find someone who also matches those values and priorities. So as an example, um, let's say you're someone who really values honesty. This is one of my values, right? But as soon as you get into like talk to someone or get into a relationship, you start not necessarily telling the truth all the time, and you're kind of like people pleasing, and you're not necessarily being fully honest. Someone who doesn't value honesty, you're going to attract someone like that, right? Because you're not living the value of honesty. However, when you're living the value of honesty and you say things how it is and you're very authentic, and authenticity is one of your values, you are also going to attract someone. When you're being fully yourself and you're authentic, you're going to attract someone that values that sees that as very refreshing. And so the very first step is understanding what are your values, what are your priorities. Uh, Finding out what your core values are. There's a bunch of tests online to help you figure that out, right? What's your top 5 core values, all of that. And what I would recommend is every value you have, how are you actually living that today? If you say one of your values is faith in Islam, do you like the way you're living that today? Or do you just say it because you think that's what you should be living, but you're not actually living it? So the first step I like to help people with, the first like pillar, is, are you living the life that you say you have, that you want? I want to be someone that is like a good Muslim, a strong good Muslim, and I love, community service, and I love honesty and authenticity. Are you actually living those? Is that showing up in your life? Or if we were to take a look at your life, do you spend most of your day scrolling, on social medias, and like kind of numbing out throughout the day? That's a sign that you're kind of ignoring your goals, and just not living the values that you say you have, right? Why is this so important? Because when you have a full, amazing life, and you're so happy with your life, and you're so like satisfied with the way you're living it, your du'as, first of all, become so much more powerful, because you're coming at it from a place of like, Ya Allah, I am doing what I say I want to do, and Ya Allah, send me someone that matches my energy. And this energy is someone like, you're living that kind of version of you, which is someone who does, says what you want to say. So if you're living a high quality life, you're going to also attract someone who's also living a high quality life. It's an amazing match, right? But if you're someone who's just scrolling all day, like no purpose, no nothing, and just kind of wasting time, it's not going to be as amazing, and to find someone that you're looking for, right? So the values will be kind of a mismatch. So back to your question, first step, Are you actually living the life you want? Are you enjoying who you are? Do you enjoy your life? Do you have fulfilling friends? Do you have a network of wants fulfilled? That's step one. And I can go on, but I'll start with that for now.
By all means, the platform's all yours. But no, I
Yeah.
appreciate the answer, definitely. And I think it's definitely important. I think you mentioned friends, which is the last thing. I think it's always overlooked. I've always spoke about it. But I think, especially specifically for guys, I can't speak for girls, obviously, but for guys, that you should definitely make sure you should ask yourself who are your friends before you go get married. Because I like a lot of it. If your friends are always going to clubbing, or they're wasting their time, I don't think no girl wants to be around you. Because how can you? It's funny because you always hear the thing guys saying, "Oh, I want a wife like Aisha, like the law on her," but then they don't have any of your qualities of the companion of the prophet. It's like, how are you demanding stuff? And I think it's really important to before you even like I understand like the marriage on the physical intimacy level and whatever, but I do believe that from my end, marriage, even like myself, obviously do see myself getting married soon, inshallah. But at one point, I remember when the whole marriage topic would come up, and I always look back at myself. I'm like, I was not ready at 23 years old, because I remember when I was having conversations with my friend, and you can remember this, I would always say, no, I only care about success, I only care about business, I only care about like flourishing, because in my head, I couldn't see myself getting married and being successful in business, which again clearly I'm lost. I lost. I stand corrected. But I think it's really understanding your mindset, being clear, being emotionally intelligent. So many things go in, and also I think a key point is also being around a good Muslim community who's able to, like this guy right here, also allowing you to grow and be better for yourself.
That was step one. Before we get into step two, yes, wanting to get married is one thing. It's a beautiful thing. When do you go to their parents? Because a lot of people, they might have met someone, they have an idea about someone, and when their heart is set, or when they have the manifestation, they know this person's the one. But some parents are easy, some parents are more balanced, and some parents unfortunately make it very difficult for their child to have a spouse. When does someone go to their parents, and how do you advise someone to go to their parents if they're on the spectrum of someone that's very difficult, might not want to give in, not to the person's characters of being a good Muslim, what they do for their family, the community, or themselves, but due to things like nationalism, tribalism, race, ethnicity, these things that they hold on to, which they probably won't live to see as far as their progeny and lineage, but they're hindering their kids in the moment having such a mentality. What do you say to people in such predicaments?
Yeah, so that is people who are going through that is it is very hard. It's a very hard test to kind of try to navigate because it's so like I need to obey. I want my parents' approval, but they're not approving because of this really dumb reason. And now I have to, find a middle way. So what I've seen in most extreme cases is like if they're really not budging, they bring the sheikh in and try the sheikh to convince them. And even if they're not convinced, they go through it anyway. They find the woman either finds a whole different wali and the man doesn't really need a wali, so he can go through it anyway. So I've seen that, right? I've seen people go through extreme cases like that, and people who are like, it's not really worth it. I'd rather stay single. So that's another option too. It all boils down to what do you think is worth fighting for, and do you like your reason, and how can you become someone that talks to your parents in such a graceful way and knowing that not in a disrespectful way and like, oh no, you're wrong, you're dumb, it's just more of like, listen, I love you, mama, I love you, baba, I know this is your reason. I don't agree with it. I don't think it aligns with the Islamic values. I don't think Allah would be okay with this. I'm going to do my part of it and I'm going to get married anyway. I understand that you might not accept it, but I'm going to do this. And some people like have the courage to do that, and some people don't. I always like to push people to do what's scary and more courageous, just because I'm a life coach. That's all I do, right? But it's I think it's always worth it when you see like a really good quality person, and you can find a way to kind of navigate that. And at the same time, there's no right or wrong answer. It just really goes back to what are you willing to tolerate? What are you willing to fight for? And if it's really not worth it, and you can always just find someone else. But I there are parents that are really stubborn, like they have to be from the same village, and it's like bro, we live in America, like you, how's that gonna work? Like, Right? So they're holding on to this identity of like it has to be the same village or same like neighborhood. It's like they're still living that bubble, and sometimes parents just need kind of a wake up call and kind of push through it anyway and bring a sheikh in and do all that. Again, it's all up to the person and how strong they are. And usually I really encourage people who are struggling through this to get like either someone to help you with it, right? Like a professional, someone to kind of navigate these emotions because it can be really draining to kind of go through it.
I do agree because I do think like interracial marriages is funny because obviously our religion does encourage it, but then you have like culture, like of course, like I'm Arab, you're African, and then you see like these. It's funny because we're born and raised in Canada, like the two of us. So in my head, I'm like, whether you're Arab, Afghan, South Asian, African, doesn't matter where you are. In my head, I'm just like, as long as you're a good Muslim to me, I don't care where you're from. And I understand where some parents come from. Like, oh, for example, I'm Palestinian. So I understand like sometimes my parents aren't like this, but I understand the Palestinian culture where, for example, oh, we want to talk about, back home, the village or whatever. And then they wanted to, I'm like, Dad, I'm like, to me, I remember I had this conversation with another uncle. I'm like, that doesn't matter to me because I'm like, what do I want to talk about? Like what happened in Palestine in the 40s, it's not an issue to me. Like for me, I'm gonna talk about things that I grew up around with, and I think that's really important. I think a lot of parents are stuck with their ways, thinking that we're gonna face the same trials and tribulations that they did, but I'm like, I'm not gonna face none of that respectfully. And also too, I think that I'm not sure if you ever faced this with your clients or if the advice, but again, if like interracial marriages, like how do you help people go about that? Because it's not easy. For example, someone, for example, being I don't know, Palestinian going for an African woman, for example, from like Nigeria or Ghana or like wherever she may be from, and and it's not easy going to your parents, especially if that culturally from back home from both sides. So, what's your advice to tell them how? Like, it's not easy always, especially if your parents are a little stubborn, I should say.
Yeah, I've seen so many examples of all kind of variations of like, African to pure like the Palestinian small village that was such a disaster, but they worked it out eventually, right? Like the parents they get over it and some people get over it, some people don't. And it is again, it goes back to what you're willing to tolerate. So uh for some people I've seen like some parents do disown the son, for example. I'm thinking of one example right now. They're not talking to him anymore, and he's just like, this really sucks, but I mean, I'm doing what I can. He's still reaching out to them. He's still trying to be close to them, because all you can do as a Muslim is you continue trying, and it's painful, but you just keep doing your part. And eventually you just keep praying. You ya Allah, please soften their hearts to accept, my situation, my circumstance. I feel really bad that they're not, accepting me. And it does come down to that sometimes, that they just don't want to talk to you anymore. And it's, been a couple of years and they're just not into it. And all you can do is your part as a Muslim is you keep trying, you keep asking, keep connecting to your mom, your dad, you send so much love and all the things that you can. And, at the end of the day, you're doing your part, and we only submit and obey Allah and what he wants. And so if that's, I know people have different opinions on this. I've heard shuyukh say like, don't even bother, like just be single, just as long as your parents are happy. And there's other shuyukh that disagree with that. And so it's all depends on your opinion of what you think is acceptable or not. But yeah, there's so many different opinions here.
No, it's not an easy topic, not an easy conversation, and that's the thing. It's like, how do you go about having to be with someone that you want at the same time still being obedient to your parents, respectful, graceful, everything they've done for you, continue to do so. It's not until you do get married you do realize the lessons and the tribulations that they went through with yourself. So it's very humbling because now it's like all those responsibilities, those factors, those needs and desires and selfish reasons you might have had as a teenager, as a young kid. Now that you're also married, you realize how tough it is having to carry on that weight, dealing with the family, household, also doing work and family back home as well. It's a very humbling experience. You've mentioned step one. What is step two in order for someone to get married, inshallah?
Yes, so step 2 is figuring out what you want. What do you actually want? And I like this topic because sometimes people have an idea of what marriage should be like, and it starts coming off as kind of like a checklist of like, he should have, like you hear, right? Oh, he should be 6 foot, he should be this, he should be that, and I just roll my eyes every time because it's like you're missing out on a really good soul when you're focusing on the wrong things, like you're focusing on the wrong things that actually matter in a marriage. And so the way I like to speak about this is Allah's going to send you a soul that you're compatible with, that gives you what you're looking for, right? Attraction, emotional intimacy, physical attraction, all the things. The way Allah packages it is different than what you're going to expect. You're not going to expect exactly what you think your person's going to look like. So as an example, with my husband in the beginning, I was so resistant to the idea. Because in my mind, I had the idea that he's supposed to be really tall, and myself, I'm only 5 feet, so I don't know what I was thinking, but like right. So he's supposed to be really tall and muscular and have this kind of beard and this color hair, and like I had this like really immature idea of what my soulmate's gonna look like, and even if it's logically like I know it's not realistic or anything, but my brain just what it was so stuck on, like it had to be this way. And so obviously when my husband came, I was like, nope, it's not matching what I'm looking for. But I don't know, like that's not what marriage is about, right? It's not about what I think is good for me. Allah knows what's good for me. So all I had to focus on is I had to switch, right? I had to like, okay, what actually matters in the marriage? What matters is I want to be with someone who supports me emotionally, who supports my dreams, where I can support their dreams, where I can be safe with them, where I can communicate and we can talk through problems and we can, I enjoy their company. That's what matters, right? 10 years from now, when we're dealing with, bill problems or kid problems or stuff like that, what actually matters in that moment? It's not going to matter that he's 6 foot and y'all are fighting every 2 seconds. That doesn't matter. What matters is how does he deal with problems? How does he bounce back from his situations? How do we flow through conversation and when it comes to like, conflict and all of that? How does he take responsibility? How do I take like all of that matters, right? So the shape, the way it shows up, the kind of job he has, the way she looks, the way he looks, all of that that's just the human body. That's just the packaging that Allah has put the soul that is meant for you inside. And so your job as a human is to be a lot more open in terms of what this could look like for you. As an example, right? There's men. If a man, for example, tells me like, I want a woman who has blue eyes, she's this height, she looks like this, she got that, and I'm like, this is not Build a Bear workshop. First of all, let's reel it back for a minute, all right? Why? Like, and you can tell they're coming from this whole kind of fantasy because they have a very specific image of what it's supposed to look like, and it's like, okay, but if I told you, there's a brown-eyed 5'1" shawty that's ready to, give you what you're looking for. Are you open to that? And he's like, well, what if I'm not attracted to that? And it's like, you're defining attraction as only she has to be blue-eyed and has to be this and has to be that. That's a problem, right? That's, again, we're focusing too much on the packaging of the gift rather than like what's inside the package, which is the soul, which is like the character, the deen, all of that. That's what matters. So when I say, what are you looking for? What do you want? You have to get really specific. What does that actually look like? And that goes back to, for example, the values I talked about. I want her, when someone says, for example, I want her to be educated, okay, she has to have a degree. What is actually underneath that is they want someone who can have conversations with, right? So, for example, I had a client once who was telling me, I want a man who has a couple, bachelor's and a PhD and stuff like that. I was like, okay, why? Why does he need to have that? Because she's saying, well, it's really important to me and this. I was like, okay, but if he's someone who's like an entrepreneur and he never graduated college and, he's really smart, it's just he doesn't have the degree, is that okay? And she was like, oh, I never thought about that. Right? Because it's not about the degree, it's about what's underneath. What are you actually looking for? You're looking for conversation. You're looking for like emotional intelligence, really, at the end of the day. But oftentimes we don't think about this stuff because we just think we know what we want. We think it has to look like this. And when we don't challenge what we want, it becomes a problem, because then even sometimes we put a lot of expectation on one person. They have to have all the things that I'm looking for in one person. It's like, no, bro, that's what networks of friends is for, right? Like if I'm looking for someone who who wants to go hiking, like I would really love if me and my spouse went hiking, but together. But if he's someone who's not really into hiking, but he has everything else, I can meet that need with a friend. I don't it doesn't have to be my husband. It doesn't have to be your wife. So try to list out all of the wants that you have, and look at like what specifically has to come from your spouse, and what is something that can be outsourced. Because even subconsciously these expectations really get to us, and when it comes down to it, we'll find reasons of to reject someone because of a stupid reason that we didn't really think about. And because people don't know this, they think that like they're rejecting because of a good reason, and it's like, no, like we're human beings and got to be a little more open of what this means. And there's so much to talk about here. Like in examples, for example, if let's say a woman was told growing up that debt is really bad, having debt is bad, and let's say she meets a doctor who obviously has debt because medical school costs millions of dollars, and we're in America and whatever. So obviously he's going to have debt, but everything's amazing. It's just that he has debt. Why is that a deal breaker? Well, because I was told that's bad. But like that's what partnership's about. You join, and he takes responsibility for it, and you work it out. It's not just like an absolute deal breaker and that's it. Like there's no compatibility. It's a partnership. You build from scratch. You build from the ground up. It's not again Build-A-Bear workshop where everything's perfect and you go in and everything's going to be amazing. It's you have to challenge all your wants and all of these, and really question how that could look.
I love how you said it's not a build a bear workshop, because even though like it's funny, but it's so true. Because it's funny, because like I guess when you look at the average guy, like, oh, the girl has to have blue eyes or whatever, whatever, whatever. But I think the older you get, the more mature you get. Mind you, me and him always have these conversations. The number one things are obviously like dean and character, because you can be the most attractive person physically, but if your character is the disgusting and it's like horrible, you don't want to be around that person. And again, and I think that amongst guys, we always have these conversations. Is people a lot of guys always think about just the physical intimacy of marriage, but I'm like, that's not only what a relationship is. I'm like, it's not gonna last if it's the only thing that you're thinking about. I'm like, women also need emotional intimacy. They need someone to talk to. I'm like, I remember I was having an argument with one of my coworkers. I'm like, dude, I'm like, if your whole relationship is this, I'm like, you'll be divorced by the next day. Because I'm like, you need to have a conversation with your significant other. And it's funny because you obviously mentioned like certain like stuff like, oh, he has to be 6 feet tall, or he has to be this, he has to be this. I want to kind of still touch upon that, but from the guy's perspective, a controversial topic amongst guys is mehed, dowry. They're like, oh, a girl's asking for this much, but she doesn't do this. So like, and or guys, obviously girls care about height and whatever it might be, but for mehed specifically, obviously you're a girl, and obviously we know Islamically it's their right. But what's your views on mehed? Should there be any negotiation? Is it relative to what the guy is making? How should we combat this issue?
Yeah, so I took Imam Majid's advice, which he recommends 10% of the man's income. Okay. Uh, I just go off of that. Now, if the man has resistance to that, what I like to question first is, what is it about it that's uncomfortable that she's asking this much? Usually what comes up, especially for a man, there's a lot of financial like pressure and responsibility that they feel like either they're afraid of being taken advantage of. They feel like, oh, like what if she just takes this money, or like there's a lot of thoughts there. Okay. And also, let's say she demands a really high amount, and you're like, I would like to follow the rule of Imam Majid. Obviously, we're going to be husband and wife. I'm going to take care of you for the rest of my life. It's not like we're going anywhere. How would you feel about that? And if she's someone who's like, absolutely not, this is my price and I'm not going down, and is it, that tells you a lot about her character, first and foremost, that she's not willing to be, there's no flexibility, there's no like, hey, this makes me uncomfortable because of this. And you genuinely communicate your emotions from a place of like, like you're clean about it, right? You're just like, hey, like I'm really uncomfortable because this is a really high amount, and I was thinking, planning our future with this kind of money, and I was wondering, this. And if she comes up to you and says, hell no, like this is my price and that's it, then that rigidity is going to be that show up in your marriage, right? So that's something to it's the way I like to think about it is you're constantly gathering data about the potential that you're talking to, and that's your only job as you're getting to know someone. Your only job is to gather data to see is this someone you actually want to marry or not, depending on how they deal with problems. When you bring up something and you're uncomfortable and they're so rigid about it and they're not willing to compromise, is this something that you're willing to deal with in the marriage? So it's not necessarily even about the meher. This is a really good sign of how you both deal with problems. Because inshallah, like when you get married, there's bigger problems are going to come up, and it's just another like kind of sneak peek of how things are going to go.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah, but that's very true. I just want to agree to that.
Oh, it's definitely true. Definitely true. And then even after that aspect, talk about the whole thing about the marriage itself, the ceremony, where it's gonna happen, how many people are gonna attend, my community versus your community. I don't know what car we're gonna use to drive in
If
or
you're
take us out.
if you're Arab, like the whole community, bro.
Debke, like what's going on, like all these things, the nuances. Some partner might want all these things, so they're used to it. They grew up in it. Another couple, another partner, sorry, I might say, might be more reserved, more conservative. They might not want all the things, a little bit less. So how do you deal with that? Like as far as like they know they're good for each other, they went through the process, they're qualified, their parents are liking each other and stuff. But when it comes to the ceremony itself, one culture versus another, and now they're trying to debate on what to do and what not to do. What should people do in that situation?
Yeah, so I was actually talking to one of my clients about this. He's just getting married, and his family wants a huge Desi wedding and all, how they have like 20 different events, and and it's like I'd rather put this money in a down payment on a house, right? Makes sense, very logical, especially the pressure that there is on men to do all this. So yeah, right, very logical. Now, what the choice you have here is either you can do the emotional work to allow your parents to be disappointed in you of why you've chosen not to do that, or you can give in and spend that money and not deal with that emotional problem, right? I always push for the harder one, which is to deal with learn how to deal with the emotional stuff that comes up with disappointing parents about like, hey, like, they wanted a $60,000 wedding and you didn't want that, and you like your reason, and it's very solid and grounded in your values. Now, are you willing to, let yourself feel the consequences of that? And I always think it's the more empowering way to choose that option. And usually people get over it and they move on. Like honestly, no one really remembers weddings. Like nobody really cares that much. So yes, so your parents, you could choose that option of doing that, or choose the option that I did, which is my all my family, they all want my family, his family, they all wanted a big wedding, and me and my husband, we didn't want that, but we let them do what they wanted to do, and it's like, all right, we'll just show up. It depends, it really depends on. It was kind of like, all right, we'll show up to this circus and see what happens, but it's just not. It really depends on what you're willing to tolerate. And I always like to say this to everyone because some people just don't even want to like have any conflict with their parents in any way. They'd rather pay thousands and thousands of dollars than deal with that. That's one option. When it comes to conflict with, like, let's say the woman herself wants a big wedding, but the man just wants a simple wedding. It helps to kind of talk through what's the middle ground? Is there a middle ground in any way? And it's really helpful to think like, like I'll give you what you want, on one of these days, but can we do this something small like this and that, only because these are my reasons, and she lists out her reasons and that, and and sometimes if it's really hard, bring a third party in and to kind of discuss it. But again, I think it really helps to see in situations like this, um, to see how we deal with problems. When one person wants this and the other person wants, is there any sort of compromise to reach a middle point? And sometimes there's going to be disappointment on either ends, and allowing that disappointment to come up and kind of grieving the dream that you wish you had. But as long as you're prioritizing your relationship with each other, what actually matters here? Is she someone that just gives up on the whole relationship because she didn't have the wedding that she wanted? Or is she someone that's like, no, you know what? I really value you. I really think this could work. I'm okay with just like, a simple wedding. And, even the other guy, like if the guy's like, you know what, I value her, I want to give her the dream that she wanted, I'll do this if she wants. And it's just really all communication. There's no right answer here.
No, I agree. Honestly, I think big weddings, like I don't really care for a big wedding. That's too much money, especially like in Canada.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
crazy, dude.
I
Like
agree.
sometimes
Yeah.
you always have these like gatos that almost coming in, like, do I even know you?
Yeah.
Like, why are you here? But then the thought in my head, I'm like, as long as they have like a minimum $500-600 in that envelope, we're good. That's the egotistical mind that I'm thinking about. I guess
I'm
my
with
last
you.
question.
Yeah.
There you go. See, that's it. It's
Yeah.
like if you have money, then we're good. If you
Yeah.
don't, masalam. But so I have a question for you. I guess my last question for you is: social media has a huge impact, both men and women. And usually, like like I know, like a lot of girls get hate for it because they're always comparing themselves, but guys can do the same thing. Like guys compare when it comes to cars, boats, the certain lifestyle. Now, me personally, I'm obviously not married, but I've always been a private dude. I know he's also a private guy. Ironically, we have a talk show, so it's like, make that make sense. But I think what's the importance of staying private on social media? Because I understand like you want to show what you're happy, but then again, you're giving the viewers, your social media viewers, who you don't know could be envious of you, negativity, or you can draw unnecessary attention. So how do you what's your thoughts on that? Like in terms of like social media and hiding your marriage from the world?
Yeah. I think it goes back to your intention of why you're sharing it. Um, it's kind of funny story because in the beginning I would share pictures of me and my husband, and I started getting really weird messages after that, and I was like, all right, this is not worth it anymore, right? So it kind of goes. My reason for sharing was kind of to show an example of like there are healthy marriages possible, like you can find the one that you want. That was my intention of sharing. Some people, their intention of sharing is I want to show people that I'm loved and I'm this, and I want to make people like, it's kind of like a status thing for them. It's like I want to show people that I'm loved. I would always check your ego before posting anything because Allah knows your intention and somehow it comes back to you. It really it goes back. And so it just I don't know. This is hard to answer because, for example, my husband shares pictures of me on his Instagram and I don't really care, but because I have a bigger audience, it kind of it matters. So, but it goes back to your intention. It goes back to why are you sharing it? Are you sharing it because you want for example, you want to share a picture of your wife because you want to recognize her and make her feel appreciated and like, loved, and because she likes that attention, whatever, right? Your reason matters, your intention matters. Um, I do think if someone's posting a little too much of the relationship, there's something definitely wrong happening there. Like, why do you need to share every little detail? That's a problem, right? So, um, yeah, it just depends on your intention.
This is why I ignored my phone on Valentine's Day because I knew I was gonna see everyone
Yeah,
posting their relationships. Oh, I love my certain person. I remember in my head I'm like, no, absolutely not, because I know all these people forget 364 days of the year, but this one day they remember that they're in a relationship. And it's funny because in my head I'm like, why are you remembering your person on this specific day? And I always have arguments with certain people. I'm like, people always get mad at me. They're like, I would say if I was married, I would never post my wife. But I'm like, why would I post my wife? It would make no logical sense. Or like even I don't need the unnecessary attention. Not sure if we lost her. Did we lose her? I have no idea.
oh, are you back? Okay, you get
Okay,
disconnected for a
okay,
minute.
cool.
Okay, yeah.
In the post production, no one would know. We'll fix that definitely. But we want to say thank you so much for obviously coming on the podcast. We enjoyed this conversation really much. Myself and Mohammed, obviously, we're looking forward to this conversation genuinely. And yeah, anything you want to say?
Yeah, I would say from this conversation, it was incredible. All the answers was very powerful. And once again, if people have any questions about what to do, how to pursue marriage, or even in the process, like we talked about the results, the middle of the marriage, towards the end, definitely reach out to her. I think she's very credible. She obviously has the credentials to talk about it. And I think it's one of those things, like you said, this constant reflection, knowing that it will get better. And that mindset can limit you or can power you depending on how you go about it. So thank you so much. And before you leave, definitely remind people of your socials where they can follow you and ask for more advice or even to join your course, inshallah.
Yeah, yeah. And just a final message for anyone listening. Uh, Marriage can happen much faster than you think it can when you align yourself to who you need to be. when you align your thoughts, your self-concept, the way you think of the opposite gender, the way you think of marriage, when that is all aligned, you have the capacity to have that blessing enter your life. And I'm surprised, alhamdulillah, every time I work with a client and I notice the shift in them and they notice better potentials, Allah's sending them better potentials because they're able to see and act differently. And subhanAllah, they get married. Like it's really that easy. And so that's what I work with my like one-on-one clients, especially. And for those of you getting started, I have a course called The Inner Shift that helps you shift your entire perspective. That helps you shift your mindset, your just your whole identity. I like to call it an identity because our identity is a bunch of thoughts of what we think of ourselves and how we operate. And so I help people with that, and it's an excellent program, and a lot of people benefited, alhamdulillah. A lot of people felt so much at ease about this process and saw different results and saw all of this. So all of that is on my website, and that one's right now is just for $200. It's a simple course that just includes all of that, and you have a Facebook community. You can like learn with other people who are also doing the same work. And you can also work one-on-one with me. I am accepting new clients in about a week or two. I have a couple spots opening up. And all of that is on my website. And you can always DM me if you have any questions. And Osama Muhammad, it was an honor, honestly, getting to know you guys. And this was a really fun
Likewise.
conversation. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Okay, cool.
You're
That's
welcome.
gonna end the podcast quickly before you